Hello everyone, welcome to Turtle Talk. This is Barbara Three Crow. I want to thank Pattie and all the hosts of Awake Radio, especially Tracy for all of her help today, and the listeners for tuning in. Hoichichilo Tunkahotawian. I am also known as Gray Stone Woman. I am Métis, Nanticoke, Lenape, Delaware, and adopted Lakota. Celt and other European ancestry thrown in there too. I am a daughter of the Great Spirit. I live here in the Hudson Valley that had once been the sacred land of many First Nations people, along the Mahikanituk, the sacred river that flows both ways, named by the European conquerors the Hudson River. I want to share some things with you today, some insights, perspectives, maybe some personal experiences, and I hope that some of what I will talk about will sink to your heart spirit. You may have heard our talks regarding the First Nations people, their law and treaties, and especially with Gerald Whitehorse Standing. He has often spoke about Meredith Quinn and his teachings on original law. So I'm going to play a video titled Ancient Teachings of the Musa, Meredith Quinn. And this is presented by Lester Howe, White Thunder Man. But first, I'm going to read this quote from the information in the video that will help us understand the importance of Meredith's message because it concerns all of us. Nowhere in the pages of history can there be equaled in total the injustices done to man when one realizes the injustices done to the Indian of this hemisphere. Never has a civilization contributed so much to the comfort of another, such as the Indian did in providing a government system, a defensive method, a new freedom, his foods, and 95% of their medicines. All that the First Nations people asked was to be left alone, that their culture not be disturbed or their lands destroyed. In turn, the First Nations people became a nation without a country, unprotected from exploitation. They became the most oppressed, the hungriest, the sickest of all people. Never has so much land been stolen from a flag of progress and millions upon millions of lives murdered from the table of peace, that not even the great Genghis Khan, the pharaohs, Caesars, or Hitler, totaling their murders, could equal the number of deaths among the First Nations people, estimated by white scholars to number 120 million. In the beginning, the white government agenda was to convert certain Indians. These became Indian Scouts for the government, known as Hang Around the Fort Indians, Indian police, and the sellout chiefs and council governments who betrayed their own people by allowing the military and police to recruit our young men and women today. They knowingly have our children give up their allegiance to the Indian way, the way of their ancestors, and instead they give it to the Crown in Canada, and in the case of the U.S. and other First Nations people, our Indian children give their allegiance to the United States government. The question is, how will these sellout Indians answer the Creator when asked, "Did you live the life and lie of the white man?" The purpose of this information in this video is to educate the world to the true legal identity of signatory tribal people, specifically the First Nations of North and South America and their descendants. Now, I think that this video that you're going to listen to is probably about an hour. It's a very important one. It really gives us insight and information into what the elders have been talking about. Meredith Quinn is no longer with us. He was a well-educated Native person. He became a lawyer for the people, for the First Nations people. And his understanding of the law and treaties is really in depth. And he really shared this information and this messages to help the people. But I do want to emphasize that what is going to be heard in the video concerns all of us, black, red, yellow, and white. So just sit back and get your tea and coffee, and I'll get back to you at the end of this, and I'd like to bring in some of our other hosts so that we can maybe discuss and get some feedback too and their opinions on this. So, okay, so I'll get back to you after this. We'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Greetings to all my relatives. My name is White Thunderbird Man. I'm of a Bear clan, and I am from the territory of the Rocky Mountains. It was the territory from where my late grandmother was from, and before her, and my late mother. I identify the matrilineal lineage because it is my true identity. My father, not to be denied, was a mixed blood. He was a Scottish half-breed, as they would say. I was raised by my grandmother's side and lived with my grandmother and grandparents, both of them, for some time until I was stolen. I was stolen from my mother when she first moved into these white man towns. And it was that time that I really began to try to find out what law, whether it be religious or otherwise, they used to steal me and my brothers and sisters from my parents. So that was my first introduction to law. So we're going to begin there with an idea of who I am and the purpose of talking to you in this manner. In my lifetime, I've tried to protect the earth. I've tried my best to protect the earth and the people. Whether or not I was aware of it, and there were others like me, were aware of it or not, whether we were aware of it or not, we felt it was our responsibility. When I grew up and met others who believed as I did, a lot of us were labeled as Indian outlaws, which I feel so good to have been, because it just simply meant we were outside the white man's law, the one that was used to steal them from their parents as well. So when I come home after many years of trying to help people regain their lands and to be able to protect them, I learned much from so many of the nations all over North America. I've been fortunate to go to Brazil and meet with tribal people there who are being exterminated as I speak. I've been fortunate to meet people who still never have seen the outside world, and I've communicated through them or through others who communicated my message to them, and that was to never invite civilization. I talked in this manner in Brazil, and I tried my best to give them 300 years of experience of civilization, to my knowledge at that time. And my research, that's what I summed it up to be. 300 years of experience I could explain what happened to our people. And that mostly comes from the knowledge of those who kept it sacred or secret. And in my travels, I found out it was mostly the old women who were the keepers of our true law. I was fortunate to meet in my lifetime those old-timers who must have suffered so much and have been so lonely to keep what they knew. And I'm going to share some of that with you because my hair has changed color. And if you're wondering about this, it's because it's the colors of the clan I belong to, of the Bears. And to give you an idea, after coming home for all my struggles, I come home to the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains. When I got home, there was no longer anyone left at the place that our old people knew all their lives, in the hills just before the mountains. So I came home again to a struggle to get the land free so that someday I could build my house and rest my head. So upon returning home, I was fortunate to meet other people who believed as I did, and as I still do, and I know they still do. So our struggle began to free the land. We went through the usual process of learning. We were arrested for hunting to feed our babies as we had them. In the place that I lived, in the mountains, with the mother of my children, there was plenty to eat in the forest, but nobody seemed to want to take a chance going out and breaking the law, the white man's law, because Indians were being convicted. Indians who had what they called today's status cards, which way back was a treaty card which gave them the right to do all the above, hunt, gather, whatever they desired upon the land. I know that. Now those are rights that were somewhat lost somehow because of a law. So I had to find a way to stop them from using that law. In my travels and in research, I've come to know legal terms or law maxims, legal maxims. One of the terms that I came across was corpus juris secundum, which means second law of the land, which would be, for example, the United States of America. So I knew at the time we're dealing with the Crown of England, which is separate from the United States of America. Here in what they call Canada, everyone was under the law of the Crown. Up until 1947, everybody was referred to as a British subject, an Indian, or an inhabitant. 3 classifications according to international law. Indians at that time still lived the way we were trying to live upon being arrested. So we had to look seriously at what they were doing to destroy our way of life. To use a law to do it, this is what we had to know, that law. So we sought help from others who became allies and then became family. There is a process. And we began to have a look at this other level of law. I knew for the longest time that there was a first law of the land, but never being able to define it, but always curious. I was instructed to go to the east, where I would find what it is that I needed to know to free the land. For a good 20-some years, the quest was very, very hard. And I knew what I asked for along the way from old-timers, old men and old women, and I know they helped me to get there. So the quest wasn't any easier, but I knew I would make it. And I knew when I went east that this was the time. And upon arriving there, we went to meet with late Meredith Quinn. At that time, he was alive and well in 1994. I knew nothing of Meredith by his name, but I later realized after speaking with him that I was aware of some of his accomplishments and was always curious. For example, how he arrested a judge, and he never was a lawyer. He was a legal Indian. So this is where it began. The term law and how we use it. He began to introduce us to a concept in law which he found in his travels in what he called the world of the white man when he was on his quest, sent out by his grandmother. And he explains it this way. The law of the white man. He said, it is a science that supersedes the truth, that is perpetuated by suspicion, that makes it impossible for two honest people to sit down in a court of law and settle their differences, because one has got to be guilty. So that was his introduction to the white man's world as he explained it. It started in and ended with law. So he began to explain to us the difference between the law of the person and the law of the Indian. When I say Indian, a lot of people today get very disturbed, and it is not to offend you, because the term is so accurate in describing our ancestors and also who we are today. Now, to go back to the law of the person. The law of the person derives from the right of discovery, which derives from the law of the primitive. The law of the Indian comes from, and many anthropologists know what I'm saying here now, and so does the ruling class elite of this world know what I'm saying now. The law of the Indian comes from the Great Mystery. In references to the law of the past, it was referred to as the ancient law of those who were tribal or of the tribe. That's the law where you get the law of the Indian as well as other tribals who may still be in this world. whether it be Africa or wherever, or other continent. Now, there is a term used besides Indian, which goes farther back. Now, the term, although it be in English, can best be explained by going back to the past. The Indian, way back, was, as far as even anthropologists have tracked, the Indian goes back several ice ages. They don't know how many. For example, our tribal sciences, after you study them, under a tribal scholar, will explain that. Ours goes back 5 ice ages. Now, so the law of the Indian goes back to the ancients, the tribals, through time. Now, it is recorded in various books throughout time where our law came from. Because part of our law, as I've come to know it, is that we were to keep record. And it was the responsibility of those who ruled us in the tribal government. And that was the women. So through time, the first record of our people as ancients, there is a book sitting in the British Museum of Archaeology Finds, London, England. And I believe it's 4 leather parchments. It's written in the language of the Indian here, the written language, and it's also written in Hebrew. Now, it is 2,000 years older than what is referred to as the Septuagint, which is supposed to be the oldest Bible in the world. Well, this one is 2,000 years older. And the term it uses is quite interesting because it also comes from Hebrew. The term used to describe the Creator in the old book is understood to be interpreted to mean that Creator is feminine. I don't mean to offend anyone, but the truth of all of it is found in that old book. And the book that was removed is that exact authority right which I just explained. And the reference to the woman in the old book is daughters of the Great Spirit. And from that book and the first introduction and chapters of it, it says that the Great Spirit considered the women of the clans as his daughters. And they're referenced in the old book as angels, or pure light. Now, that didn't come forward. It was removed in the 1500s from the old Bible that carried it, which was printed in 451 AD and distributed throughout the world. It contained daughters of the Great Spirit. And it instructed tribals when to sit in council and to keep the earth in balance with the rest of creation, which was our responsibility as guardians of the earth. It's in the old book of law, the oldest book of law. Now, I will explain again that the law that we go by when presented, or if you're allowed to present it, it supersedes the law of the primitive or the white race. Now let me explain what I mean by white race. White race is simply a choice of people way back in Europe, and I studied, and I can provide all references, which I believe we will do separately on this presentation. But the white race were a people who chose no longer to be of the tribe in Europe. That's the difference. One continued on to be of the tribe. The other decided to be of the race. The people of the race began to accept the new interpretation of the old book of law. And I can guarantee you today, and I will present the references, that all religions in this world are controlled. They're controlled. Even religions that are referred to as being Indian in this part of the world. So all law deriving from your religion or your philosophy or religious philosophy, that is a prerequisite to be accepted even in today's international law as a country. So the very idea of separating our law and it becoming a practice, it's undesirable, because ours is to be a living philosophy. It was given to be lived. I won't refer to the in-depth happenings between Europe and here since first contact. There's enough written about it. What I will say is that because our ancient people did not accept the new law of the primitive and the new book they brought later with their missionaries, 100 million Indians were killed because they still would not believe. So we have some experience in relation to the origin of religion when we say Creator, Great Spirit, although we're saying it in English. In our world, it's another matter, in the language or within the mind. So a lot of Indians think that it does not belong anywhere but in a sweat lodge or in a teepee, which is true. But wherever you go, you're to live. You're to live your belief. See, that again is the spiritual proposition in law. That's what makes it valid when you can live it. Now, to give you an example where there's always a clash between the law of the primitive and the law of the people of the spirit, late Meredith, who I refer to as a tribal scholar, which he was, I'm going to introduce you to him now and give you an example of how the law works and why the law of the primitive clashes with ours.
Haynes Doctrine. That's an agreement that the white men had to sign down and say that they would no longer ever kill an Indian, cut him up, make steaks out of him, have the Jewish rabbi bless it, and sell it in the meat market. Now, you know why the Haynes Doctrine came about? See, scalping came from Europe. And so they used to scale, like scalping Indians out here was big business. Even among the millionaires are prejudiced against one another because of two groups. The one that's called the old money are the families that made all their money off human steaks, scalps, and all that sort of thing. That's called old money. The new money, they do not associate with the old money. So even among them, they have their own prejudice. But anyways, scalping got so good, the white man thought he really had it, right? So he come out to where I was. And only we learned how to do it really good. I mean, we were good. We were so good that the civilized nations had to sit down with the Dakota Empire to say, we now have to determine that is a crime against humanity by scalping him. And we had to agree that we would no longer ever scalp the white man again. And that comes from the Payne's Doctrine. Never mind what these colleges say, oh, scalping comes from bullshit. We were just good at it. We took the one thing that the white man scared, and that is to go around clean shaven on the head. And I like to remind him of that. Okay, so cannibalism. So cannibalism was part of the white race. Now there's a difference between the white tribes and the white race. Like it's the same identity when we say Washishina, we know that's a member of the white tribe. And then the Washichu is the white race. The cannibals are the white race. Yeah, it's the same with, you ever hear of St. Paul, Minnesota? That was the capital of our empire. It used to be called Otonto. And white people, tribal people that got driven from their countries over in Europe, they came there and they lived with us. I can take you a lot of towns in Minnesota who, when you come into town as a Sioux man, you're treated like a king. You know why? Because they were given territories, you understand, to live in and not to be molested, that the Dakota people gave to them. There's a lot of that back where I come from. So it's not always the same, all white men are prejudiced. It's not so. So, no fish on Friday is the fact because of Payne's Doctrine. And you got to remember, when you ate steak, Indian steak, that was called the long pig. And from everybody that I've ever read on it said the long pig tasted a great deal like the short pig or swine. So the church doctrine of not eating any meat on Friday, it was put in there to make sure that the people through generations would stop eating human steak or stop practicing cannibalism. So you're talking about the people that were attacked, that were cannibals, that's what they were.
So cannibalism was going on before Columbus.
Well, yeah, Columbus, it took 10 years to kill all the Indians in the Caribbean.
Because they say that's when cannibalism first...
No, that's where it's at. That's all. It took 10 years to kill every Indian in the Caribbean. Did you know there are no Indians in the Caribbean? It took 10 years because it was used as a food supply going back and forth across the Atlantic. And that's recorded documentation on this man.
After meeting with Meredith, the late Meredith Quinn, he taught us that the old religion, when lived, can only be identified to the white man, really, by explaining the law that was used to outlaw that religion, which was done. So when he is asked about his religion, which I now feel good to say, I also explain, as late Meredith did, he's of the old religion that the United States declared hostile to all other Indians. That may sound very profound. No, it's truth and it is law. Along with what happened, the introduction of this new law, religions were made up. They look Indian, but they're not. They were made up by early spies among the various missionaries, call them what you will, black robes, had that sort. They reported on what they saw of Indian rituals and all that sort of thing. So this is where the information comes from, which was given to the military. The religions were made up by the military. The sole purpose of it was to have Indians quit living their old religion, quit living it. So it came down to very few Indians after 1885. There were very few Indians left. The law was explained so clearly in our time, not too long ago, by one of the old chiefs, who was a true chief, and meaning by the old law, the women appointed him. The clan mothers of Dakota appointed him as the head chief of Dakota, and that was the late chief Sitting Bull, or as we would say, Epelmostus. He was the one who explained to the commission when they forced him to come in and address the commission. There were other Indians there who signed a treaty with the United States government and were made prisoners of war. And many of them were his partners, family, brothers, during the wars against the United States, who were trying to destroy them. And many of them who sat in there with that commission when Sitting Bull addressed it, many of them signed that treaty, yet it was the United States that was to sign a treaty dictated by Dakota, which they refused when they were defeated by Dakota on 3 occasions. So the United States still owes that treaty. Now, in all of this, Sitting Bull explained in a few words when the commission said and referred to Indians. And they tried to explain he's no different than any other Indians at that agency, which was not true. He never signed a treaty, he never surrendered anything. So his statement was very profound. He said, and interpreted, of course, he spoke only pure Dakota. He didn't speak Sioux, he spoke Dakota. He said, they responded, Indians? What Indians? I'm the last. So even today, people are probably astounded and thinking it's so profound a thing to say. Perhaps so. But having a look at what Dakota did to defend all territories, it cost them dearly through time, as it did many of the tribes, to try and protect the people by our law. Now, so sitting with late Meredith was such an honor, it's beyond even mentioning honor, because he wasn't in it to be slapped on the back or to be given a prize. He did it because it was his responsibility to try and free the people. When I met with him and we communicated, I knew right away that this is exactly what I asked the old people who used to put me out and suffer me harshly. When I asked them for a way to free the people, find a way, I knew that was it, sitting with him. He also instructed that there is a law that is used to keep the Indian today in their place on the reserves. Now, he points no finger, but he explains it, that the existing system on a reservation today is nothing more than an autonomy type government. autonomous, comes from Greek autonomos, meaning self-rule or self-law. But you're under the supreme sovereign of another country. It also comes down to being a charter. So it's a charter type government. And its only function is to serve the government in this country, Canada, and in the South, the United States. And is designed to eventually destroy the Indians and break down the law of their treaty. That was the purpose of it. There is a case in the state of Washington that was blacked out by a court order from the state governor, but of course Indians talk about it as I'm talking to you about it. It came to light for me later on in my years in the movement on the West Coast.
Have you ever been in an incident where you could arrest a judge?
As much as subpoena the judge, but
I arrested a judge. I arrested a judge off his bench. Have you ever heard of the Tacoma, Washington, what they call the 57, Tacoma 57?
I've heard of it.
There were 57 Indians that were fishing salmon in the Pasquale, what is it, the river in Tacoma?
Yellow.
Huh?
Yellow.
Okay. And they arrested him. Charged him with all kinds of crimes. These guys were going to be gone 15, 20 years.
I remember that was Hank Adams.
That's right. So they called me up to do it, and so I said, well, shit. You know what I mean? These guys got autonomy governments. They give allegiance to these state governments that they call Indian governments. Shit, I'm whipped. And I remember I seen some of the films on it. It looked like a war zone. Have you ever seen some of those films? Jesus. So the only thing I looked at, I did a title search on the city of Tacoma. So I went and did a title search on the city of Tacoma, and I found that the deed for Tacoma was not a legal document. It had not been signed over by any group of Indians. It had never been terminated by an act of Congress. I went to the court and I told them that, and I showed them the documentation, and I said, I arrest you for terrorizing, oppressing Indians. And he came right up. Oh, come here, come.
He stepped down off the bench.
Yeah. You know, the white man knows his law. Don't kid yourself. He knows it backwards and forwards, in and out. Don't ever underestimate him.
Did you prosecute him after the arrest?
Huh?
Did you prosecute him after the arrest?
No, they were gone. They went free. Just went out the door. And they could fish from this river right 22 Tacoma.
So I just explained to you the source of their law. We can go into all the differences as why it's enforced or why it should be enforced, but the truth of it is it doesn't belong here. We are now in times that are very troubling for many people of the world. And many people are worried about their children's future, or if there is a future. In my travels, as in the life of Meredith, who often comes to my mind when I travel, what he learned from many of the people of the world, many of them know that this is now time to change worlds, just as it's happened before. So it is the law that you go by that will determine your children's future. And there's no buying a membership in this one. In his lifetime, what he said was he saw the implementation of programs on the part of the United States government, and of course here in Canada, because they're very, very much the same, similar, that are designed to destroy the Indian. They're designed to destroy the Indian. He showed us programs that even contribute to the suicide of young Indian people. I can say, after looking at the information he provided, that I was somewhat a victim of that process that he explained. And it actually is mind control. It simply is mind control. And we had a very serious distaste for the destruction of the clear cutting, which was farther east of us, for the death of the caribou herd there, to highway traffic. And the people were told in that area, also by their the keepers of their creation stories, whether they be recent or not, they were told of a highway coming through there. And it wasn't described as other than a highway. So it was foreseen by one of their old people. So they've lived it in their time. So I had to have a serious look at the law that I was given to carry on. So when I really studied it in depth, I realized this is, if lived, the way to free our people, is to become legally who we were given to be. So after discussing it with those of us who agreed, and it was our personal choice to become part of a tribal government and become responsible and protect those mountains as we were given to do, we decided, those three of us, we did it. So there was a responsibility, according to international law, to serve notice, in actuality, to the world. To the world. To let them know that there are still tribal people left on this earth, and that we are serving notice that we will not, our law does not allow for any further destruction. And that the command sent from our territory to the Crown of England had been acknowledged by the representatives and by the Queen herself, Queen Elizabeth II. So we fulfilled our responsibility by learning the teachings from the old man who was sent to free Indians. So his responsibility is carried on the best that I can. And his responsibility again came from the woman's side. The authority was his grandmother. She was the one who passed it to him, the tribal knowledges. So that responsibility again goes back to the authority, right, which is the woman, his maternal grandmother, his mother's mother. He did a document about her. Her name was Streichard. Agnes Streichard, Dakota. Now, her mother was referred to as she who speaks once, and she was the head clan mother of Dakota, and she was the woman who appointed Sitting Bull as a chief for all Dakota. So this I do know. So upon receiving it from Meredith, he's already, in a white man's world, presented his credentials and who he is from the authority right of the woman's side at the United Nations. In 1973, right after an incident many of you may know about or heard of, was the Wounded Knee confrontation. And it was in South Dakota, a place called Wounded Knee, where the Dakotas 1890 were slaughtered and they were buried. It was a standoff, armed standoff, which many of us gave our energies and whatever we could to, that people would never be harmed. He was the legal representative chosen by the headman to go to the United Nations. So he went as a representative and also as a descendant of signatory Indians, the authority right coming from the woman, his grandmother, who the United States know was descendant of Sitting Bull's people, a true sovereign. There's a case that comes to light. It was in the state of New York, a federal case, where he explained the judge ran out of the courtroom. And I have met some of the people who were in the courtroom at that time, who witnessed the judge running out of the courtroom when Meredith began to make his legal presentation. And he explained the reason that judge ran out of the courtroom is that he wouldn't be responsible for the collapse of his corpus juris secundum, second law of the land, his rule of law. So Meredith went by a law that superseded second law of the land. Now, let's go back to that. He simply said to us, the reason you're still all right out there, where they don't disturb you too much in the mountains, he said, is because Dakota defeated the United States in that area. I know what he meant, because Dakota was part of the families, were in a sense one of the head families of all the tribes. We were related through clanship all the way across this country. We were related through clanship. Now I'll stop here and I'll have to say that's the purpose of those who came with the right of discovery. They came to destroy us. And that's where this court system comes from today, that Meredith was continuously putting an end to. Now, so when we look at law, for me, it is so simple. I can think of how that was applied in 1800s, 1850, 1400s, earlier, and today. For the future of Indian people in this world today, being this 2007 Gregorian years, it is a time for Indians to wake up and become Indians. So let's look at that term and relate it to law, which we learned also from late Meredith, or I prefer now to refer to him as the Musa, which is given Indian name named by his grandmother. So when we look at the law today, and we look at the law that governs Indians, you can pretty well tell the effect it has had on pretty well everyone. Now today, there are court cases that will never be addressed. They'll be put off until what is introduced is a system that supersedes the Indian. So I'm saying here and now, Indians should wake up, because there's going to be military courts. It's already introduced in the United States, military courts. I've met people who ran through those courts where you have no say. Now, when you become a legal Indian, there's a possibility of stopping it for the good of the rest of the world, if the rest of the world will listen and acknowledge who we are as tribal people. The law that we go back to when we become Indian comes from, again, the teachings from late Meredith, or the Musa, los sin Dios, which means those without God. So remember the law that you go by, and when you say that you're native, then you're no longer Indian, because Indian comes from los sin Dios. It was a death sentence, and it was also sanctioned by the Vatican, and the terms used were spelled out in the various papal bulls issued by the Vatican. So, Los Indios was the reference to our people. Some of the professors I've met in my time said in Indian studies presentations that Los Indios means una ente los indios is what Columbus said, the gentle people in with God. No, I thought, no, that's a death sentence. It's a death sentence. So the papal bulls issued by the Vatican said that the people here, our ancestors, los indios, those without God, can be killed. And I want you to know that law has never been removed. It's been stopped. It's been stopped by Dakota. It's been stopped by other nations, Indian nations. They had to defeat it. And at times, including physically, they had to defeat it. So that's where the term comes from. So those without God. Now, the reason being that many did not accept God. They went by Creator, Great Spirit. And it's in the oldest book in the Bible. It's Creator, Great Spirit. It's what it is. It was in the version 451 AD, that version or copy of the old Bible, which contained daughters of the Great Spirit. The Creator, Great Spirit was acknowledged. Now, where the changeover happened and where the law of the primitive, or those who used religion in a false way to control people, it began with one who's known throughout time as Osiris. And the religion is known today as Isis, ISIS, who was a goddess on this earth, was considered to be a goddess. Her husband and brother, Osiris, was considered to be a god. And he commanded the changeover and introduced the new Lord God. And it was forbidden to ever associate with the people of time, or the serpent people, who were referred to all over the world as the ancients, who still went by Creator, Great Spirit. So that's where Lord God came from. Now, Ezra, who is responsible for writing the Septuagint, which sits in the British Museum of Archaeology Finds, London, England, right next to the old Indian Bible I told you earlier. Now, Ezra wrote that version, and he changed already from the old command of Osiris, he changed Creator, Great Spirit to Jehovah. I believe Jehovah is the reference, and later on Jehovah. So there it is. So that's the beginning of some of these religions, which today I believe there's 5,000 religions claiming to have the true God. So when we look at the law, and when Meredith explains to a lot of the authorities who ask him about his religion, when he says, I'm from the old one that they declared hostile, the reason it was declared hostile is because if you look, and I'll give some references, the old law said that you were subject to the clan mothers of the territories upon this earth, or the angels. And it was only the women who had the power, and still do, to peace or making war or punishing any member of the tribe. So it also makes reference to the use of the forces of nature in the old book with the reference Creator, Great Spirit. The new one that was introduced, where they leave out the daughters, and put in the new Lord God or Jehovah, that's the beginning of the use of implements of war and destruction, police action, and mind control, which is not legal. Now, we're going to move up a little bit to some of the teachings, and I will also show you some of the documentation. And here's what explains how people of the world can be freed. But it takes your lifetime, as we mentioned earlier. And here it is. There are 6 Aboriginal treaties, 6. That is the foundation for all international law that every nation, civilized nation that is, must abide by. Those treaties are wampum belts, peace pipe treaties, canes of authority. Now we're talking before Columbus and also after. The other treaties are long before Columbus. They're the Seal of Solomon Treaty, which covered all blacks, Arabs, and Israelites. Asia and Minor Asia were under the Palladium of Troy Treaty. All Saxon, Anglia, Mercia, Northumbrian groups were members of the Cleopatra tribes, or the white tribes of Europe, and were under Noah's Ark Treaty. So Noah's Ark is not a boat per se, it is a treaty, which Noah is forced to sign, and I have the date. So these 6 Aboriginal treaties that are the foundation for all international law. From them come the law of nations, which has clan mothers who hold territorial right all over this earth, even today. So when we look at those 6 Aboriginal treaties, that is really the law that kept the world free. Very simple. Peace. Now, when the women were in power, then the government, as it's called today, was the law of the land. It could not be superseded, wherever that woman held territorial right. It is still the same today. Now, so the civilized nations, the civilized nations of the world are subject to this law, because the foundation comes from tribal people, comes from the first law of the land. Now, I must say again and emphasize again, the elite of this world understand this because they have to, because they don't ever dare violate this law. Because if it happens, their law all around the world will crumble. And that's exactly what the late Meredith set out to do, was crumble it. And that's why the judges ran out of the courtroom, because they were superseded not only with knowledge of law, but they were superseded by law itself. Now, it's quite simple. One rule of law supersedes another. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking, well, it's the biggest gun in town that has the power, that decides people's futures. I'm sorry, that's not true. You may have the biggest guns, you may have the most guns, but you still have to use a law in order to shoot those guns at people. So if we look at what is happening in the world today, there's a conflict in the Middle East, and everybody knows it's over oil. So what would protect those people? If they brought back territorial clan brothers, because the civilized nations are sworn by law to do everything humanly possible to protect tribal custom and usage. The law of the tribes. So having said that, it has been done. You won't hear about it on the 6 o'clock, but it will be done. They follow the law to the letter. But there is a difference here, now in this country, North America. There is a difference in relation to the law that we once lived by and the one that is ruling our very lives this day. The old man explained law and jurisdiction quite simply at times. He said it's quite simple. Today it's the Indian that does in the Indian. Because those who signed the treaty with the United States and or Canada, it's considered a surrender, where they applied another law called alienation, severalty, and guardianship. They're the three requirements that all these civilized nations are bound by from the Hague Accord 1873, I believe, to the Geneva Convention 1948-49 implemented. War crimes. So all these civilized nations are bound. So tribal custom and usage, which is the supreme law of the land, is now reduced because of signing a treaty dictated by those who are of the law of the right of discovery and became second law of the land. Now, how did the United States become a legal country? That's pretty interesting. From what the old man uncovered, and some of us had some knowledge of it at the time we discussed it, but he put it exactly by law how it happened. See, when the United States people were simply, they were not even known as the United States yet. They were simply members of a penal colony. They were like prisoners. And when this alleged war took place between the 13 colonies, it was Abraham Lincoln, who was actually a renegade, leading the North to defeat the South. Now the South was the legal government simply because they had more money and they were financed from outside. So they were on Indian land, but they were there without holding any title. They were never allowed to hold title. That was the agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and all of these colonies, because they came here because of religious persecution. They were being killed as tribals over there. That's why they came here to begin with. So they're given refuge because of presenting the sacred signs that you need to present to show that you're tribal. So that's how they gained entry. So these 13 colonies went to war. And, you know, when the North defeated the South, all it was two groups of prisoners having a difference of opinion. That's all it was. But the North made a Seneca Indian a general in their army by the name of Eli Parker. And if you look at United States history, you'll see Eli Parker writing the stipulations for the South to sign, even though the South was a legal government. Now, this Indian was a signatory because of treaties before Columbus. He was acknowledged as a sovereign, because it's only sovereigns that can make treaties. The United States was not the United States at that time. It was 1865 when they came into existence as a legal entity. But their reference to sovereignty is in question. Now, corpus juris secundum means, and this is from United States court history, that the United States can never have royal bloodlines. And in their court history, they explain who the royalty is in this part of the world. Remember, this is a function of a country that isn't allowed to have royal bloodlines. So they explain those Indians, even the term they used, I believe, was aboriginals, who go by the ancient religion, where the women of the clan select or appoint the chiefs to speak on their behalf. It's to be understood that they are the kings and queens of this country, and their offspring are to be of the same bloodline. Now, I brought that up to make you people realize it's because of the clan system, your bloodline was important, and it was always the mother's side, because she was part of the original law, daughters of the Great Spirit, as all women were on this earth. So when we look at it today in relation to like what we did in the mountains, is to serve notice to the Crown of England to show that the authority right is back. So even though they assumed jurisdiction there, they still had to have a clan mother over that territory, a white clan mother. So whoever she was, it's not important to us. The point is, we commanded the Queen and told her to let whoever owes title there, let them know, no longer. The women there hold title. So when the old man said law is simple, I seem to understand what he meant. There's maybe a lot involved, but it's quite simple. But simple things are hard. He says law is simple, but you guys take it somewhere it doesn't belong. And I realize what he meant. So the purpose for Indian people today should be not focusing on the concepts of this alien world in relation to secularization in thought, like the environment being separate from... No. We've got to bring back the tribal system, and it is in actuality a way of thinking, a way of being. A lot of the genetics of Indian people are astounding. And what I know from tribal law, and if you follow the genetics, you can find children today that I wouldn't say that are super smart. They're spiritually attuned, and they are very intelligent children. Not all, because some of them are still governed by that mind control from the time you put them in schools, indoctrination goes. Where that mind control works on some, others it doesn't. So when you take children and put them back in a place like we did with our children, where they never went to school, we served notice to the governments, both Alberta and the federal government of Canada, no jurisdiction, and here's why, because of the command to the Queen, the tribal government we put together, the women ordering the territory to be freed. Education, we identified, was dangerous for our children. So they were kept out. Province didn't bother because served notice to the Ralph Klein government. So they never bothered us. Now that is fine for the environment, if you will, or the territory we live in. We want to keep it that way. So the children must learn, firstly, about the rivers, about the animals, about all of it. So that was their first education. Their mother and I decided, and the other families decided that came with us, that we were going to reintroduce, which has been done. Now, the concept of education, now here's one again that was very, very powerful, is the Indian education system. It was so powerful, again, back to law, those who were of the false law, right of discovery, through time, they put in place the law that outlawed the Indian educational system because it was proven the Indian was above average intelligence of the white man after he learned English. So you can imagine the Indian in his own world was super intelligent from childhood. So the tribal sciences that we talk about can be reintroduced, and it comes from the natural order. So when I look at the references and I look at the past of our ancestors, those who struggled, gave their lives to protect this law, that the generations through time would hopefully reinstate it to the world. I believe that time will happen, where the children today are held in trust by the state. Anywhere in this world, the children must be freed. Because by the old law, you know, some Indians talk about 7 generations. Well, this law and the tribal sciences, the knowledge of it, is to be passed on to the unborn. Because it belongs to the unborn. So that's what perpetuated our concept of life or time. So for this time, we will introduce some documents, but that will suffice.
And we're back.
Thank you, everybody. Wow, I'm just so happy to have found that link to these teachings, this information.
Sorry, guys, I haven't. I've been listening on site. I didn't realize you guys were talking.
We just got on, honey.
Oh, okay, cool. I just put the headphones on. I said, "Oh shoot!"
We just got here. I was just going to ask you guys to come on in, and yeah, can we get? Well, there's Tracy, Patty. Who else?
Dog.
2 Dog. And what about seats?
Okay. Hold on.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I'd never heard this one before, Barb.
Yeah, it's really just filled me with such good feelings, you know, that this is available to us. And yeah, I've heard bits and pieces of it on, you know, the other talk show, on listening to Gerald and everything. And
Yes.
I finally got around to searching it out, and then I listened to the whole thing, and I just said, well, I just got to play this for everybody here. So
I'm really glad you did. I'm glad you found this. Would you
Okay.
like me to play a little music while we get people in?
Yeah.
yeah, good idea. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Calling 2 Dog now.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
we're back. I've got a few people here that going to give some feedback, some input into what we just heard. I just want to thank everybody for hanging in there, and I hope this was as interesting and exciting for you as it was for all of us. So, yeah, there's Zeetz with us, Pattie Walking Turtle, Chief Charles True Dog, and Tracy Kennedy. So, yeah, I got really excited when I found this link, and as I said before, we've heard a little bit of information on this, on Meredith Quinn, over this last year from Gerald Whitehorse Standing. And he kept saying, check out Meredith Quinn. And I just finally got around to it. I did some searching the other day and came across this one talk, and I listened to the whole thing, and I was really excited and also blown away by the information. Put it all together. He put it all together so well. This fellow who was talking today, and yeah, what do you guys think? I know you had some good responses on the chat and everything. Tracy, I know this was really meaningful for you, as you expressed. Do you want to start?
Please do, Tracy. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Barbara. It blew me away. I've heard bits and pieces of this, and I met Gerald because of the Camel's Eye Treaty. I was actually talking to someone else about a story that my grandma told. And she had always said that we didn't come over here in slave ships, that we came because of an old agreement, and we married into the Mohawk Iroquois Confederacy because of an ancient treaty. I couldn't prove any of this, other than I had a ring that's 7 generations old, and you wouldn't have thought that someone would have a gold ring if they were a slave, which was a clue to me. And it's in the middle, there is an eye. So I ended up talking to Gerald, and then 2 years ago I found out, yes, we married in to the Mohawk clan, and we actually went from the States to Six Nations, and it was because of my grandmother 7 generations ago that slavery was abolished in Canada. So all of the stories seem to be true. So I was completely blown away by this because, I've been talking about the changed timelines. I was talking about the slavery and the loss of traditions that happened in Europe and the timeline of this. And this just sums it all up, takes it to the next level. It even talks about Isis and Osiris. So I dug it. Thank you very much for finding it. Awesome find, Barb.
Yeah, great. Anybody else want to jump in?
I found it, incredible, because actually it's been a lot of what I've been saying forever. We do have to go back, and, I do believe we do have to go back within the clan mother system, the ways of the clan mothers, the ways of our women. It hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'm really blown away with Tracy to actually hear this. And yes, Tracy, I do know that's exactly how that happened with your family in the Mohawk.
Yeah, well, I know we've been talking about the clan mother system, the matrilineal system, and I've certainly been talking about that too, and it does align with the prophecy of where we are today. So it's very timely, the prophecy of that return of the clan mother system, the sacred feminine, which basically upheld the harmony and balance for the people and so on. And so, when he speaks about that, and also we've talked about the fact that all nations, black, red, yellow, and white, our European brothers and sisters, our own people, because I'm Métis, some people of mine came from Europe. The clan system there, it existed.
Well, you had the Scottish, the Irish clans. You had the tribes of Europe that defeated the Roman Empire. So we were all tribal people, black, white, yellow, red, across the world.
We also had the matrilineal system as far back as Egypt, and the revering of the women as sacred, as light bearers. They were talked about that way as well. So, Pattie, what do you think?
Well, it's we are separated by continents. We are separated by oceans. We are separated by governments. We are separated by education. But we are together in the fact that we are all related. The ancestors knew this. The indigenous people who still hold on to the truths, who can still remember them, they say this. But even those who have lost their clans, who have lost their history, just because history will refuse to remember does not mean that within our hearts we do remember. And that's what he's talking about, is that we each have that connection already. And, I was reading a little bit earlier today about the Rainbow Tribe, and we are seeing that today. The most important thing that he did say, that he put out to me through that whole thing, was that it doesn't matter what color you are from the original tribes. You are all related. We are all related. One voice, one language, and I think that's the thing that hit me the most, is that if we can just get that message across, if we can just forget about color, if we can just forget about governments and things like this and just do away with it, we will naturally come to that realization, and we'll be able to get back to our ancestry and the ways of our ancestors. It's in us already. We see it with the people that are listening to the show today, with the hosts, with the owners of the station, everybody here on the Awake Radio Network group and all the other stations, all the listeners, they understand this. They know that we are related. They know that their culture was just as rich as ours, but their history is lies, the same as our history that they've tried to cover up. And Two Dogs said something in the chat that I wanted to bring up also, or one of you did, about in 2 generations, there won't be any history left. And this is how they do it. We see the systematic erasure of our ancestry, of our history, the true history. So, but this time now, I do see a resurgence. I do see us coming together, us realizing who and where we come from. And I have to say also, there's so many things in there, but I'm not going to take up very much more time. But that was the main thing that I wanted to talk about that I got, and there's a lot more in there, but it was a brilliant interview or whatever clip.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that it's beautiful. It is truly beautiful to hear the history that is truth, and no matter where you are, this is the truth to you, to be able to have it spoken.
I just want to say also that who was speaking was White Thunder Man. He's at Dakota and, of course, up in Canada. I just wanted to pay that respect to that young man. Actually,
much honor to him for what he did say.
Yeah.
Yes.
He talked about how he was searching, right? I mean, he got the feeling or the sense or the longing, whatever you want to call it, the calling to go out and look for the truth. And he started with, of course, the elders. He calls them the old ones and the grandmothers, and he went around and And 10 years he was doing this. It's a long journey to find the truth. And then he met Meredith Quinn, and that opened up a whole doorway of truth and understanding of the beginnings of this country, what happened, and also back into Europe. So I also like the fact that he brought that in, because we're always talking about that, Pattie, about that we're all First Nations people, we're all tribal people. Those that came here to Turtle Island from the European countries, were all tribal people, and they lost their way, their clan system, and it had been generations and generations. And I think it was Tracy who said it only takes 2 generations before your history, your way is lost. So
yeah, I think it's omni-important that that message get across, because we've got to start seeing each other as true brothers and sisters. We've got to start acting in respect of each other, no matter where you are, no matter who you are. The histories are horrible. The futures will be just as horrible if we don't stop and come together. We each are part of the same family, each and every one of us. And that's the only way we're going to get through this, as far as I see it. Thank you, Barb.
Yeah, I agree. And Zeetz, I'd love to hear what you have to say. It's good that you're on. It's been a while. How are you?
Yes, good. Thank you, Barbara. Very interesting part you played there, and it made me think in part of it, with the 120 million Native American Turtle Islanders that were massacred because they didn't believe in the Christian God, what would happen if in the beginning they all said, okay, let's believe in your Christian God now? Would those 120 million have not been massacred? And I would say they just wanted the land, and nothing would have stopped that avalanche. What do you think?
Well, I totally agree with you, because many did actually go into the European religions, and that's really it didn't make a difference. It was the land. They just kept scarfing up the land more and more and more, pushing the original people, the First Nations people, into these tiny reservations. It didn't take long for that to happen, like a wave, like a tsunami wave that went across the land. There's an actual video that shows a timeline, of how that happened, of the amount of, the places throughout the whole of Turtle Island where the First Nations people lived. And then little by little you see it all being taken away, and them just getting crunched into these, smaller areas. Yeah, I don't think it would have made a difference, because many of them became Catholics, many of them became Protestants, many of the First Nations people became Methodists. And unfortunately, this has created a divide, of course, still within the people, the First Nations, because you have traditionals, what are called traditionals, that still hold to the old law, the original Creator's law. And that's what White Thunder was talking about, the original law. And so then you have them living together on these reservations, and you have this, this separation and this issue of the traditionals and the ones who have been converted to the other way. It's really rough. My teacher, Wallace Black Elk, said to me once, he said, my own people will be the ones who would kill me because I follow the way of our ancestors. Yeah. So.
Yeah, traditional, non-traditional war.
That's right, and that's deliberate. I really believe that's deliberate.
Barb, I'd like to add to that Zeet's comment. They would go around, and this is documented. The churches would go around and they would set up in the forts missions and such like this, and they would bring the Indians in, and their purpose, and this has to do with the Catholics mostly, but other ones also. Their purpose was to bring the savages to Christ so that they could then be killed and saved. This was the purpose of many of these missions that were first set out. So there was never I don't think there was ever a time, any more than there was in any other country, continent, tribe, clan across the world. This was a systematic, barbaric way of getting rid of the opposition, getting rid of the indigenous people of the land, wherever they went.
I agree with you, Patty, very much, because it was to, before they kill you, they have to save you. So pretty much that was exactly what it was.
Yeah. Patty, I just realized I asked you on the Skype chat, is Holy Walker there? Because I forgot to call him in.
Checking now.
Okay. So it was very interesting to me. Also, I'll have to go back and listen to this to take notes about the many treaties that all the four nations, black, red, yellow, and white, were under. Like you're talking about the Camel's Eye Treaty and where that came from, the origin of that, and which people, and the Cleopatra, which was the interesting, right, Tracy? Do you remember?
Tracy had to step away for just a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I found it very fascinating, because this, of course, is all still in place, these treaties, and nobody really knows it. So all nations, black, red, yellow, and white, were under these original treaties, the original law of the land, it's called. And
treaties they never honor, and it's all mind control, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing, we're all mind controlled. We're all being mind controlled, and that's been going on for generations. And now we've been saying, it's not just the First Nations people that are on the reservation. It's like now all people are being squished and corralled into a reservation system. This is what we're looking at. Yeah.
I mean, Russell Means of the Lakota also stated that whether you live on Pine Ridge or Chicago or Illinois, it doesn't make a difference anymore. Welcome to the reservation.
Yeah. Well, we can all say that now, and we're all seeing what happened. Basically what's happening to us, the losing our rights, our constitutional rights, the spying, what's going on with the police shooting people in the streets, and the the police state accelerating, and on and on. Not only here, but we see it's been continuing. We've been in perpetual war, the United States and Great Britain, throughout the whole of the world. It's just trying to squeeze everybody into this rule, the one world order, new world order, one world religion, and the res. We could call it the res, right?
Well, definitely can, because if you look at the way the world's going all the way around, it's just one great big res, no matter where you're at. I mean, people are getting killed for no reason at all. Basically, what we did have here on Turtle Island, is it's an old Indian joke, actually, but it's not really a joke, is that the Indian had the land, they had the Bible. Now we got the Bible, they got the land. If you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah. No, it's true. And somebody on the chat had said, where can they get that original Indian Bible? Gerald has spoken about that. that, I mean, what is it? Several thousand years old.
Yeah.
That's in the museum somewhere, hidden, locked under lock and key in the museum in Great Britain, I think. And he said, "How can I get that? How can I get that?" And I said, "Well, you
They're not
can't."
going to turn it loose. Number one.
I said, "I'd like to see it myself, but they're not going to, because it holds all the truths. It really holds the truth, right?"
Exactly. I mean, they're not going to let it go. I don't think they will. To be honest, I don't think they will. They'll let it go. And as far as the governments we have right now, as far as the true treaties, the Camelot Treaty, and everything else of that manner, I don't think these governments are going to want you to know about these things, because it's their way or no way. If you get my point.
Yeah. Well, what he's talking about, the significance of the matrilineal system, the clan mother system, and he basically said it. We've been saying this, that all nations had that matrilineal system. And why is it so? Why is it so important? Why was everything set up that way? Why was that the original way? I mean, this is very important to know, that all nations, black, red, yellow, and white, and some still remain that way. You have tribes in India, you have tribes in Africa, pretty much all over the world still hold, and even here on Turtle Island, still hold the way of the clan mothers, the matrilineal system. Granted, a lot of the First Nations, have lost that, or had been, taken away from them. It's been corrupted, for sure. But, we're working on renewing this system because it is so significant for the survival of the people. It's Creator's law. This is what we're talking about. We are talking about Creator's original law as the matrilineal clan mother system. And yes, the clan mothers determined whether to go to war or not. They were the ones who put the chiefs in place, and they could oust them if they weren't standing up, for the walking in a good way. If their behavior wasn't coming up to standards of what the clan mothers felt was essential
Exactly.
for all the people, right? So yeah, and they did say, okay, we need to go to war, or no, we don't need to go to war. And they took all things into consideration of why to go to war or why not to go to war, And Zeitz, brought up a good point on the chat. He said, that the clan mothers must have agreed, right, Zeitz, to go to war.
Yes, Barb. They weren't all love and light and, rainbows. When they needed to make that decision, they made it. So, they're human to protect their clans.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were warriors, just because, they were clan mothers, but they were also peacekeepers. But they were also warriors. Many of the women were warriors. But, when it comes to the survival of your people, when it comes to the death of your nation, you have to go to war. And that was the decision, for sure. Even though many of the nations, for instance, did sign treaties, did agree to peace, that didn't matter, because they would be there with their American flags by their teepees, having had signed the treaties, having agreed to peace, no longer going into war, and they would be attacked and massacred. I mean, this is proven. This really happened.
Only thing,
Unfortunately,
also,
history.
brother, that you have to look at, my man, and then I'll let you on this, is the Sand Creek Massacre, actually, where
Yeah.
You know, they were flying the American flag, a very peaceful band, and totally massacred in Colorado.
Yeah, that is that chief there, the leader of that people right there. He was walking out towards the soldiers waving a white flag, and they shot him right down. You know, so yeah. What were you going to say, Zeitz?
Yeah, I can imagine the people back in those days were very dishonourable. There's also an Australian parallel where every Aborigine was massacred in a little island called Tasmania down the bottom of Australia. Every Aborigine. So, I mean, the story can go round the world.
Right. That's true. Round the world for sure. And you know, speaking about the clan mothers and this, you know, the way, you know, the people were Earth people, all First Nations, black, red, yellow, and white, were all the Earth people, I call them, and they lived according to the sacred ways, the law, Creator's law, and they upheld, you know, because they lived according to Creator's law, the sacred hoop was maintained throughout the world. Now that's the sacred hoop. We are in the time of the mending of the sacred hoop, because the hoop was finally broken during that time, the massacre at Wounded Knee in 1890. By that I mean that the last of the free First Nations people, the Lakota, Chief Bigfoot and his band of people, were it was January, bitter cold January, and they were going through the, you know, the Badlands to find some place, food, and warmth. I think back to one of their own people's camps, and they were the cavalry came upon them, and pretty much, you know, we know the story. If you want to know the true story of what happened at Wounded Knee, look up or get the book "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee." It is a true account of the people, not the government's account, because that's different, very different. It is the true account of the people, the First Nations people, of what happened in 1890 at Wounded Knee. So why I say that was the time when the hoop was broken, because if you have throughout the whole of the world originally all people living according to Creator's law as Earth people, right, under the system of the Metrolineo, and honoring the Earth, living according to Creator's law, living in harmony and balance, through ceremony, you know, through the ways of the original people, which was to honor all of life, respect each other, and basically knowing that your children are sacred and that they are the next coming generations, that everything that you do for the next coming generations. So you have to be conscious. You have to be consciously aware of the way you live, what you take, how you behave. This is Creator's law. So when you have, for centuries and centuries, all cultures, black, red, yellow, white, living according to this great law, and that's sustaining energetically the sacred hoop. That's why we say it's the sacred hoop existed in harmony and balance. And then it slowly started to be chipped away at, and that started in Europe with the First Nations people there. And when they started to lose their way, and when they started to shift over into the dominator patriarchy rule, which didn't really care about the land, didn't care about the water, didn't care about the children, you know, that type of behavior, they slowly slipped into it. The hoop, the sacred hoop, energetically started to be chipped away at. When they came to Turtle Island, this was the last bastion, I call it, of the sacred feminine, meaning of the clan mother system, the harmony and balance between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. They came here to Turtle Island and they realized that they just they came upon this land where the ancient system was still in place, that was already destroyed in Europe. So they had to work diligently to destroy the clan mother system here. And like Pattie said on the chat, those people for generations that came here forgot. They forgot that they were a clan system. They forgot the ways. So when you come here on Turtle Island, in 1890, in 1890, the great majority of the people here on Turtle Island were defeated. They were, the massacres, the deaths through the smallpox and the blankets and various other diseases, the loss of their land, the loss of their food, the loss of the buffalo, all of this really started to defeat the people. In 1890, by then, all of the nations were pretty much in what they call on the fort, or those that lived at the fort, meaning they were changed, they were shifted, they were defeated, they gave up. They fought hard, but they gave up. They had no choice. They were dying, starving. 1890, you have Chief Bigfoot. He is known to be the last of the free people. His 325 some people, they're a small band, were the last to be out on the plains free. And they were pretty much starving themselves by this time, and it was bitter cold. Chief Bigfoot was really dying of pneumonia, actually. And he was...
Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was returning his people, the children, and the old ones, for food and warmth. I don't know whether it was which chief he was going back to. I can't remember right now, but who had already surrendered and who was already on the dole, if you want to call it that. And that's when they were the cavalry came upon them and proceeded pretty much to massacre nearly all of the people. Actually, riding on their horses, shooting people, running away, women with babies, and so on. And there were some that survived, and by chance, amazingly so. And they're still alive today, and they speak of their ancestors and what happened to them. And so that was when Black Elk said, "The sacred hoop is now broken." Yeah.
What they were looking for, Barb, to be honest, as far as United States Cavalry was concerned, as far as the old Custer's Cavalry, by the way, 7th
was
Cavalry.
It was the 7th Cavalry.
And what they found was they kept asking Chief Bigfoot for the weapons, and he couldn't find. They didn't have as many weapons as the government thought they did. What happens, from my understanding by talking to some of the people, is there was a deaf Lakota. He was deaf. He couldn't hear. And his name was Black Coyote. He refused to give up his rifle, and within a tug between a United States soldier and Black Coyote, the gun went off, and the army just started killing.
Right.
Everybody.
I noticed we're getting close to the end here, I think, and I just wanted to say that I'll be bringing up some more of this Meredith Quinn talks in the future, and Tracy's going to be presenting some of this as well, because it really aligns with what she's been talking about. And
I hope you join me too.
Yeah,
everyone here,
absolutely.
Because this needs to come out. So I'm going to do it tomorrow, and I would like to let everyone know that the Tribal Teachings from Musa, Meredith Quinn, are available turtleislandnews.info, because at the end of that video it talks about the documents where you can back this up, and it talks about the full writing and preamble there. So please take a look at that, and I'm hoping that you'll join me when I present this week, because this is a big topic and it puts everything together. So again, Barbara, I want to thank you for
You're welcome.
having me here and sharing this with us.
Oh, I'm so happy that you were with me on this too, and it gives me hope to know that we have these resources, and there are answers. This, basically the White Thunder Man, given the words of Meredith Quinn, gives us answers, and we all need answers. We all need direction. We all need the truth, and so yeah, I just wanted to say that and thank everybody. And I don't know if we have a minute for everybody just to say goodbye. Pattie?
Can I say before we go, I've
Yeah.
got about 8 hours of a book reading called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, but it is depressing and very, very sad. I don't know whether to put it up or not. What do you think?
Well,
Yeah.
it is. What we're talking about is hard, It is hard to hear the truth, but if you want to know the truth, sometimes it's hard. But it will give you the truth, and you will know better. You will understand better what is going on, who we are, and everything that we need to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea, Z. And to
Yeah.
everybody out there, love, honor, and respect, and Doksha.
Doksha.